Welcome to Have You Read It? The channel where we bring books to life, one summary at a time. Today we're unpacking Zeke Faux' Number Go Up, a deep dive into the cryptocurrency frenzy of the 2020s. It's a story packed with bizarre characters, unbelievable schemes, and some serious consequences for people around the world. Faux sets the stage with a personal anecdote. It is January 2021, the pandemic is raging, and his friend Jay invests a few $100s in Dogecoin, a cryptocurrency based on a Shiba Inu meme. Despite Faux' skepticism, Jay makes a profit, highlighting the irrational exuberance that was gripping the market. This sets Faux, a financial journalist, on a path to understand the crypto phenomenon. Faux' initial target is stablecoins, particularly Tether, which are cryptocurrencies pegged to the US dollar. The promise of stability, where one Tether equals $1, is immediately undermined by the shady characters involved, including a plastic surgeon with a history of selling counterfeit software and a former child actor from the Mighty Ducks. The obvious question: where are the billions of dollars that supposedly back these coins? To find some answers, Faux heads to Bitcoin 2021, a massive crypto conference in Miami. The conference is a spectacle, a mix of hype, technological evangelism, and blatant opportunism. Miami's mayor Francis Suarez welcomes the crypto crowd, declaring his city the capital of capital and advocating for paying city employees in Bitcoin, while speakers tout Bitcoin as the future of finance, a way to bypass corrupt central banks and empower the unbanked. Faux remains unconvinced. He offers a simplified explanation of blockchain as just a database or spreadsheet. The real innovation, he notes, is that it allows people to maintain a ledger without relying on a central authority like a bank. But the enormous amounts of energy used for mining becomes problematic. A key theme emerges from the conference: number go up technology. It's the idea that the price of Bitcoin will keep rising simply because it has risen, attracting more investors and driving the price even higher. He encounters figures like Michael Saylor, the MicroStrategy executive who sunk billions into Bitcoin, calling it a plant life that will live for 1,000 years. Faux chases a lead on Tether, attempting to interview Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX and Alex Mashinsky of Celsius Network. SBF downplays any concerns about Tether's backing. Mashinsky is more forthcoming, admitting that Celsius holds billions in stablecoins and that Tether lends out coins backed by Bitcoin, which Faux sees as far less safe than actual dollars. Then comes the truly bizarre announcement that El Salvador would adopt Bitcoin as a national currency. Jack Mollers of Strike gets so emotional that he cries. It is a head-scratching moment that many people find confusing. Faux speaks with professional traders who use Tether, but they are largely unconcerned about the risks. Their focus is on facilitating trades and profiting from volatility. Dan Matusevsky of CMS Holdings tells him, "It could be way shakier and I wouldn't care." He's advised to speak with Brock Pierce, the former child actor and co-founder of Tether. Faux spends much of his time chasing Pierce, first at a mansion party in Miami. The party was populated by an assortment of curious partiers, grifters, and hangers-on. It was difficult to get more than a minute of his time, and I found few answers. Then he manages to chase Pierce down on his yacht. Pierce tells me that he came up with the idea for Tether on his own. Well, I mean, God's will, I guess. Pierce only offers platitudes and tells him that if it were not for Tether, America would likely fall. Faux digs deeper into Brock Pierce's background, uncovering his rise and fall. His time with Digital Entertainment Network, a dot-com startup which devolved into allegations of sexual abuse of minors and transporting minors across state lines for the purposes of sex. In response, Pierce said the accusations were from an extortion scheme. After leaving that business, he was playing computer games such as EverQuest and founded Internet Gaming Entertainment. The IGE business sold virtual property for real money, and Steve Bannon came in to help take IGE public, but it ultimately failed. Faux highlights that this background reveals the world of virtual money was a great way to make lots of real money, and it wasn't a big leap from EverQuest Gold to Bitcoin. The story turns to the origins of Tether, tracing it back to J.R. Willett and Mastercoin, an early attempt to build a more advanced cryptocurrency. Willett's idea paved the way for initial coin offerings and stablecoins, but it wasn't legal. Willett raised money for the project in a revolutionary way by selling Mastercoins. J.R. Willett's plan was innovative, but it was also illegal, what the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission calls an unregistered securities offering. Faux asks who is ultimately responsible for the idea of Tether, and Pierce says he came up with the idea too for Tether. Pierce gets in touch with Sellers and Collins, who helped him get the idea off the ground, and Real Coin was born. But Pierce grew weary, and Phil Potter had a better idea, and that led to Potter talking to his boss, Giancarlo Devasini, who is the ultimate architect of Tether and Bitfinex. Giancarlo Devasini takes center stage as Faux begins to investigate his background. Devasini walked away from a career in plastic surgery and entered the low end of the electronics business, importing parts from Asia and selling laptops in Italy. He is accused of selling the bogus products to other companies, facing criminal charges. He built a factory where he produced CDs and DVDs, and in the late ooze, the RAM business declined. Faux continues to explain the strangeness of Giancarlo Devasini. He married a woman from the family that owns Buzzi Unicem, one of Italy's largest cement manufacturers. Devasini tried out some other business pursuits around that time, but it was hard to tell if they'd gotten any traction. In 2010, Perpetual Action Group was banned from an online marketplace called TradeLoop after a buyer complained. Out of leads to follow, I spent a morning at a coffee shop scouring the internet for Devasini's name. Devasini's name turned up in the comment section of an Italian political website called Il Blog del Stelle. In 2008, a week after Madoff's arrest for running a decades-long Ponzi scheme, Devasini wrote almost admiringly of the man who had just been caught orchestrating a scam so large it amounted to 2.5% of Italy's national debt. The post was titled, "So What?" Devasini describes himself as someone waiting for the right moment to spring into action. We can spend our whole existence doing the same things, living the same day 1,000, 10,000 times without realizing that life is slipping away from us. Then one day everything changes. For Devasini, that moment arrived in 2012 with Bitcoin. Devasini gets into Bitfinex. By 2016, it had become one of the largest exchanges in the world. However, hackers broke into Bitfinex's servers and stole a lot of Bitcoins. By the traditional rules of finance, Bitfinex should have declared bankruptcy, but instead, the exchange reduced the balances of all customers by 36% and issued IOUs to cover the losses. The narrative shifts to Bitfinex, an anonymous Twitter user who began to scrutinize Tether's claims about its dollar reserves. The author meets this person, who shares his belief that Tether is a massive fraud but offers no concrete evidence. Faux speaks to John Betts, the founder of Noble Bank in Puerto Rico, which briefly banked Tether. Betts confirms that Tether had dollars to back its coins when it was his client. But he suspects Devasini later put the reserves at risk to get a higher rate of return. Faux explains the New York Attorney General was investigating Tether. State Attorney General John Castellan sent a simple 34-question survey to 13 of the largest crypto exchanges. But instead, the exchange reduced the balances of all customers by 36% and issued IOUs to cover the losses. In February 2019, Tether's lawyers came to the Attorney General's offices for a meeting. A standard part of an investigation like this. The attorneys acknowledged that Bitfinex had placed more than $850 million with a payment processor, Crypto Capital, and it appeared to be impaired. The Attorney General went to a state court in Manhattan with its findings, seeking an injunction barring more transfers between the companies. The revelation did not set off a run on Tether, and instead there was a bailout. In February 2021, Tether agreed to pay $18.5 million to settle the New York suit without admitting wrongdoing. He tries to understand the situation, learning that Bitfinex had been using Crypto Capital. a Panamanian money transfer service, to handle funds, but Crypto Capital was actually a money laundering service. After running into issues with Wells Fargo, it was not able to recover the money. It is revealed the Polish authorities had caught on to the scheme and seized their bank accounts, where they were keeping most of the cash. Faux travels to the Bahamas to meet Zhang Chalopin, the chairman of Deltec Bank, which was willing to work with Tether. Chalopin vouches for Tether's assets, stating that they were sitting at his bank. However, he admits that most of Tether's money is now held elsewhere, limiting his visibility. Back in New York, Faux gets a hold of a document showing a detailed account of most of Tether's reserves, including short-term bonds and risky debt from Chinese companies. The findings concern Faux. Tether is not very forthcoming and calls the reporting FUD, short for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Short sellers are starting to look at the information that Faux has gathered and are starting to circle, thinking that Tether is going to fail. They're trying to get more information. One of those, such as Hindenburg Research, announces a reward for that type of information. While thinking about this situation, he reflects on conversations with Sam Bankman-Fried about his plans to do good, asking whether it would be justified to run a scam to fund charitable causes. He was not convinced of Bankman-Fried's good intentions, as it seemed like it could be a self-serving narrative. Faux continues on to trace down Giancarlo Devasini. All he knows is that the life of this man is cloaked in mystery, and the life he has lived appears to be a scam. The book then describes all of his findings from the investigation. Bitfinex lost half its Bitcoins in a hack only a few years earlier. Other findings about Tether include that the company was a client of Noble Bank, had trouble with banks, and that people on Twitter were spreading lies. Faux is left not convinced and still wanting answers. As Faux's frustration mounts, he finds a report that the Bitfinex and Tether are working with a bank in the Bahamas. The Prime Minister has stated that there is a strong digital asset legislative framework in the world, and that the arrival of FTX is proof that they are headed in the right direction. Faux finds that Bankman-Fried has said that Tether was basically bad at public relations, but that the guys behind it were perfectly trustworthy, and that there is no transparency or oversight or system to feel confident about the company. The perspective changes to Razzle Khan, the rap persona of Heather Morgan, and Ilya Lichtenstein, who are identified as the Bitfinex hackers. There is also a discussion of other cryptocurrency schemes and hacks that are more common than robberies. Law enforcement finds the couple and arrests them, which is big news. A small portion of the funds were traced, and it seemed as if the hack might turn out profitable for them. While doing research, Faux finds a connection between Chainalysis and Tether. Specifically, that Chainalysis was now working with the blockchain. This also made him realize that in the hands of the right experts with great technology, almost anything could be done. Faux also looks into a pig butchering scheme to understand the scam. As he's researching the pig butchering scheme, he is contacted by Vicky Ho. There is a discussion of money mules that the scam uses to get money, so it is clear that the money mules were critical to the business. Even after speaking to a private investigator, he finds the private investigator had failed to turn up any evidence that Devasini was involved in tax fraud himself. So he has again hit another wall. As Faux gets more desperate to learn more, he starts to follow his guide and learn how the scammers make money. He joins an NFT Bored Ape group. The group was talking about a festival to be hosted by Jimmy Fallon. Faux is finally feeling like he has his foot in the door to learning more about Tether and the world of cryptocurrency. Faux finally attends the festival and gets to speak with some more key people. However, he learns that there is a lot of insincerity. He notes that the business plan was more or less the same for everyone, and the market was to help people make money. His contact had made another blunder, and he got a lot of questions about a project. And this made him understand the real purpose. Even after his attempt to infiltrate the world of cryptocurrency had failed, he is still getting contacted for the story. Celsius makes a huge announcement, and Faux starts to see how to make money. As all this is coming to light, it looks like Tether is going to stay afloat while everyone else sinks. Faux is left not really learning anything, and the high value of the study wasn't there. The final act begins as Faux summarizes that Tether and the people that make up the leadership are just as, if not more, elusive than when this project began. It looked as if there were a lot of problems that no one knew how to solve. The people who are close to Bankman-Fried start to turn on him and say that some bad things have happened during the rise of crypto. As time passes, the public also begins to get involved and are coming forward about how much they have lost. After the chaos, Bankman-Fried agrees to sit down with Faux and say that it had to be done. And nothing was ever as black and white as it looked. As the conversation ends and the book nears its end, the reader can tell the whole situation will soon collapse. During the conversation, though, he said that he did fuck up, and all he wanted to do was save the world. As Faux reflects on the journey that he has been on, he can't help but think the whole industry was a scam, and he had fallen for the allure of cryptocurrency, just like everyone else. As the book wraps up, Faux leaves the audience with a few easy-to-remember heuristics. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Do not place all your eggs in one basket. Do not trust people with a history of fraud. Do your own research. Do not follow social media hype. There is value in understanding how financial markets have evolved over time, and don't get caught up in something because it's new. The central takeaway: the number go up technology of cryptocurrency created a speculative bubble, enriching a few while leaving many others with losses and devastation. It underscored the need for regulation and critical thinking in the face of financial innovation. Thanks for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next book dive.